All right, welcome. Today I'm going to talk about how to get the most out of attending a tech conference. On the lower right is a link to my slides, and you can press P if you want to follow along. There's some links in there, and there's some extra notes that I won't talk about. On the lower left corner is my Twitter handle. You can tweet at me or about me. Feel free to jump in at any time, since this is a local group. We don't really have a deadline, a timeline. So you can ask questions or add your thoughts. Feel free. All right. Aditya Saram, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, better known as Deech, posted this tweet during Strange Loop 2015. In this group, you probably know Deech as Esther's husband. So I responded with several tips. They're kind of obscured down here. So I went home and I discussed this Twitter conversation with my wife. And she told me I should give that talk. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not that person. So it took me a bit to warm up to that idea. So Deech says, and if I didn't have a mic on, I would let him say it. Organizers of future conferences, I really need to talk on how to get better at going to conferences. I'm really bad at networking. So I'm naturally a shy person. I actually own this book, The Shy Guy's Guide to Dating. I don't own it anymore because I'm married. So I decided like 15, 20 years ago to work to be less shy. So I've been working at it for a long time. She did, and I did. This is not a photograph that I took. It is from Amazon, I believe. I only remember one word from this book, and that word was pounce. I don't think that it was like in a smarmy way. I don't think it was kind of gross. I think it was just like, all right, you know, when you've decided to do something, like act on it. Like just don't sit there and stew over it. And that must have stuck with me, you know, that one word. Today I consider myself to be more of an ambivert. So an ambivert's a person with a balance of extroverted and introverted traits. So I have a lot of situations where I'm still an introvert, but there's a lot of situations where I can appear to be an extrovert. Like if I'm in my Ruby group here or my Unix group, like I will be like the outgoing person in the room. And some of that's just comfort and even shyness. I probably would have gotten over my shyness without trying in those respects. So Strange Loop 2015, and there were two conferences right before that, were kind of a turning point for me. I networked a lot better than I had before, and that's why my wife said that I should give that talk. I kind of almost felt natural at it. I had another one of those just a month ago at RailsConf 2019. I felt like I did well. It was the first time we went with a large team, and it's the first time I was representing my company at the booth. And then we had an after party, and it was the night after I gave my talk. Fortunately, it wasn't before I gave the talk. So you know, you're the night before, you're up late, you're cramming, you're trying to get everything looking good, practicing. So I was tired that night, but I was on. You know, we were supposed to be answering questions for people at the party about our company, and like I was going up to people and like, hey, I'm Craig, you got any questions? So it was interesting that I was sort of almost not myself, but more just outgoing, and that party was fun though. They had a DJ and I actually danced. There's still more progress I can make. So when I was doing some research on this, Carl Jung coined the terms introvert and extrovert, and he identified this third middle category, but he didn't actually put a name on it. And I assume he gave those names. I assume he gave German names and we have English names. I'm not sure. So the other funny thing is that various sources put the percentage of ambiverts at somewhere between 20 and 70%. So who knows? So inside, I still feel like an introvert most of the time. But even that's somewhat starting to change. So the difference, I like this definition sort of at the core. An introvert tends to recharge by spending time alone. And you spend your energy being around people for long periods of time. Whereas an extrovert would gain energy by being around people. I'm definitely not that. Although, something's interesting. My wife is extroverted, and I'm introverted, or more towards the middle at this point. But I actually really like being around in a crowd, just an anonymous crowd. And my wife doesn't like crowds, so I find that a little interesting. Someone said it's sort of the anonymity that kind of makes the difference there. So, by the way, one of my biggest fears is speaking in front of a large crowd. My number's about 50. Any more than that, I get nervous. So I'm almost always okay in front of a small local group. I only had one, I think, locally that the Linux user group, I had 70 people to talk about compiling the kernel. So my first few conference talks, and about probably 4 years ago, I decided I wanted to give talks at national conferences and started submitting. And the first one, man, it took me a couple Xanax to calm down. And normally a couple Xanax would put me to sleep. So, I was pretty nervous. As more talks I do, the less nervous I get. The feeling after I finish is amazing. Like, I feel pumped up. I actually feel high. And I like the value that I've provided to other people and myself. So it's kind of worth doing and kind of worth getting over my fears. Let's see. The last talk, the last couple times I haven't needed any Xanax or anything. I still pretty nervous going up there. This past year was pretty good. The year before that, I was like shaking until I got up there, and about a minute in, I was like, "Oh, I got this," which is a good feeling to have. And I think I had a similar feeling this time. So the good news is you can make some progress, or you can make a lot of progress, actually. Bad news is it's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of time. So our good friend Jessica Kerr tweeted this. So she said, "Awkward is one step toward breaking social convention." I think that's partly right, but I think also awkwardness can be a step towards breaking through our own social defenses that sometimes aren't very helpful. And for a lot of people in this room, we probably face more of the latter than the former. So, of course, figuring out which is really hard and probably necessary. So, first tip is, when going to conference, plan your travel so you reduce as much stress as possible. Don't cut it close. That just creates more stress, and you're already going to be stressed. One of my tips is layovers should be no less than 1 hour. I have run through an airport probably more than a handful of times trying to make a connecting flight, and so I won't do less than an hour anymore. A story. So a couple years ago, I was the alternate speaker at Windy City Rails up in Chicago. I didn't end up speaking, which was funny because I had this whole talk prepared, and a couple years later, I'm like, I can grab a lot of pieces from that. So we took the train, my wife and I took the train out to Chicago, and we got in. It didn't get in till after midnight. I guess we took probably like a 5 or 6 o'clock train from downtown St. Louis, gets downtown Chicago. We go to the Hyatt. They don't have a room for us. And, by the time, and so they have called around to like every hotel in town. They send us to a hotel in Indiana. So they put us in a cab. It's a $100 cab ride. They pay the cab and they pay the cab ride back the next morning, another $100. And we were mad. I still don't like to stay at the Hyatt. The long story short is that the law says they can't kick out any guest that isn't not paid, So if you want to stay extra day, you screw someone else. That kind of sucks. So the point is that, I was really stressed going to possibly give a talk at that conference, and that is not what you want to do. Part of the other reason was that it was through one of those third-party, like Priceline, and so they didn't actually have my phone number to call me. The hotel couldn't even call me to tell me that my room wasn't there. I thought about just sleeping on their couch, like in the lobby. That might have been better, because it was 2 o'clock before we got to the hotel room, and like 2:30 plus by the time I, fell asleep, and then we got to get up an extra, 45 minutes to get back. It's just a nightmare. So try to reduce stress when traveling. So a few icebreaker tips. Towards the beginning of the conference, ask people what talks they're excited to see. And then towards the end, ask them what talks they really liked. Ask people where they're from. I remember, I think Deech and I were walking back from somewhere during Strange Loop, and we're talking to some people that we didn't know very well, and there was a guy from Australia, I think, and I asked, hey, where are you from? I noticed he has an accent, and where are you from? He's like, Australia, and he's like, Americans always ask where you're from. I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? So if you know where they're from, you can ask things about that place, things you maybe would like to know about that place. You can ask how their trip was to the conference. Did you take planes, trains, automobiles? Like, how did you get here? Was it long? Did you miss your flight? You can follow up if have they ever been to this city that the conference is in before? And maybe they've got some tips that you don't know about. Ask people what they do for a living. If you're in a very specific conference, maybe that doesn't make that much sense, but sometimes, you can ask a little deeper question. Jessica Kerr again. So hang out with more outgoing friends and have them introduce you to people. Ask them to start a conversation about topics that they know that you and other people are interested in. Who here is bad with names? I'm terrible with names. So there's some advice that kind of works a little bit for me, but doesn't work that great. So the advice is when you're introduced, try to repeat the person's name. Try to say it 3 times. Say it when they say it to make sure, well, first of all, that you heard it right or that you're pronouncing it right. And then try to use it again in a couple minutes. And then try to use it a little while later, maybe when you're.
The guy's name is Beetlejuice.
Don't say it 3 times in a row. Yeah, if you say words in between, I think you're safe. I actually try to write down names. And I try not to do it in front of people. Actually, my neighbors, I have a document with the names of my neighbors. And sometimes, I'll go review it. I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to the name. All right, their kid's name is, all right, Billy, okay. I really do that because I really, really have a problem. And it turns out my dad and my uncles, at least one of my brothers, I don't think the other brother, they all say we're just awful with names.
Probably should never end the introduction with prepare to die.
There were options that said prepare to die on the images I chose here. So purposely join different groups. I have gone to dinner more than once with people that I did not know. I sat in the lobby of Union Station, and when people looked like they were getting ready to go to dinner, hey, mind if I join you? Totally out of character for me, but it works, and half the time I get a free dinner. Because it's usually a group of 5 or 6 people from the same company, and they just put it all on one bill, and it's not a big deal. So even if you're going away to a conference, and my coworkers, I gave them this advice: try not to be with the people you went with the whole time. Try to get away from those people about half the time. Helena Converse, I worked with at Asynchrony. We were at Midwest Ruby, I think, and we went to this bar. Her and a couple of our coworkers, and she sat down and said to some people, "You look like some people I don't know yet." I'm like, that was pretty smart, and I don't think she's that outgoing either. So I thought that was great. So talk to the speakers after their talks. You can ask follow-up questions. You can ask where you can find more information. You can maybe argue a point. Please don't do that on microphone. It's probably better to actually talk to them later than right after their talk. usually a line of people waiting to talk to them, and half of that is just like, hey, great talk. I'm like, all right, you can tell me that later or tweet it or whatever. How many of you feel like it would be intruding to talk to a speaker? All right, no, it's not. Either they're an extrovert and generally don't mind people talking to them, or they're an introvert and they're probably part of the reason they're doing it is to get people to talk to them. Is that true of your talk, Steech? Or you just want to be a little bit? All right.
I just want to go home after.
You're drained? All right, fair enough. Please don't monopolize their time. But, you know, if you get a few minutes, I know a lot of people actually have told me specifically that one of the reasons they give a talk is so that people will come up and have a conversation about the topic. So, I mean, you've got a built-in topic already. You're like, hey, that was a great talk, and hey, this thing, and can we get into more detail? So you can actually dig into detail, and you know they're going to be interested in the topic. And you're probably interested because you went to the talk. Skip some sessions. There's a couple different reasons for this. One is sometimes I'll just go take a nap. Like, I'm drained, I'm tired. I've drained a lot of energy because I'm stressed by being around people and having to network, having to be on. But there's also the hallway track, and the hallway track is just meeting people in the halls, talking to people. I have a friend, a Darsh Pandit, who sometimes goes to a conference that doesn't pay and doesn't go to any sessions. He just goes and talks to people in the hall. So, you know, he's fairly well known in the Ruby community, and I'll run into him most conferences and like, hey, what's going on? A Darsh, A-D-A-R-S-H.
Oh, it's named. Okay.
Yes.
I thought it was a title or something.
Which he says there's a better way to pronounce it, but he doesn't try to get Americans to do it. Yeah, he's actually one of the on the board of Ruby Together, which is helps establish some of the infrastructure for Ruby stuff. So the hallway track is important, and there's a lot less people in the hallway, you know, during sessions. So you know you don't have to feel like you're overwhelmed by the number of people. There's just a few people here and there. You know, some people are heads down programming. Don't bother those people, but a lot of people are just, you know, like Sarah May, the organizer, sometimes I would talk to her between sessions or during a session. So you can actually get a lot out of that. Take part in any structured or non-structured activities. This is RubyConf 2017. They had a little photo booth with a bunch of props, and so you can, you know, look goofy and do that. It was in New Orleans, so that's kind of why some of the jazz instruments and some of the things. Strange Loop has the party at the City Museum, and I like to just run around, crawl around, and like I'm running into people I've never met, and we're climbing up in the airplane together, and I'm telling them how to get to the outside or the stairs to go to the slide or whatever. So RailsConf always has an after party one night, and it's not after the conference, it's just after one of the nights. And in my company, I was talking about sponsored the one most recently. They sponsored the one at RubyConf in November, and I wanted to go, but I was so drained that I just hung out in my hotel room, and now I kind of regret that because I had a lot of fun. Invite people you know to some sort of after event, or like you create your own event. Maybe people you know from the internet. People you know, people you don't know. Use whatever means of communication is available to the conference, maybe a Twitter hashtag or a Slack channel. Deech and I know both like blues music. And so, we could, if it were at Stranger Loop, we could invite people, hey, what's it, Beale on Broadway or BB's Blues and Soups? Yeah. All right. Who knows who that is?
What do you got?
All right, it says it up there, so yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I figured you would probably know. I did not take that picture, but I have been up there. Have you been up there to his restaurant? You should do it. He's getting old, man.
New Orleans?
Chicago, downtown.
You still play?
He plays, I think, every Friday in January, which is not the best time to be in Chicago. But so this is an idea I had, and I've done it at least twice, maybe a few more times. So this badge, I believe this was for Southeast Ruby, and they had a lot of space. I'm like, sweet, because I really like to do this. So I add a short list of things that I'd like to talk about that people can see and like, hey, conversation starter. I wish conferences would actually have this as a thing that you could fill out, and have printed on the badge, or at least a space on the badge. So mine for this one was ask me about Agile. I love talking about Agile. Ask me about beekeeping. If you ask my wife, I love talking about beekeeping because she's heard it way too many times. Tell me about Hanami, which is an alternative framework to Rails that's still in Ruby, or Phoenix, which is an alternative in Elixir, which is a similar language. I'd like to learn more about those. So, I don't know how successful. I think 2 people talked to me this short conference. So one time, so this is that particular badge. Another time, I took like
I wouldn't ask you about that because I can't read that.
I know, I'm getting old too.
You
I'm
expect me to read that?
quite a bit older than you.
15-year-old couldn't.
I know. Yeah, it's not too bad on here from like this distance.
You're trying, man. He's got 2 pairs of
Yeah,
glasses.
I got 2. So another thing I've done is I've taken one of these badge holders, was issued one of these badges, put it in here, and then put my ask me, tell me up here. So you can do things. I don't know. It's something I like to do, and it causes a few conversations that are about topics I like to talk about.
You could have a custom T-shirt.
I forgot to put that one in there. Oh man. So forgot that one too. All right, a couple quick stories. At RubyConf a few years ago, a guy, and I might come up with his name, I'm bad with names, he gave a lightning talk on how to give the perfect high five. 5 minutes on how to give a high five. Then he handed out t-shirts that say, I give an awesome high five. And so he's wearing them and I'm wearing them. It's been at least 5 years. Every time I see him at a conference, we high five. Like, it's his thing. Less so than it used to be, like, the first and second years. But yeah, that was sort of his thing. And I actually talk to the guy at speaker dinners a lot now. So, it's sort of his thing. I actually wear the t-shirt like out sometimes. I was in downtown Chicago and 2 people come up to me like, oh yeah, the t-shirt. Another thing I stumbled on the same night when we didn't get the hotel room. So I ended up with my wife's Tervis cup, and it had St. Louis Cardinals. And I was in Chicago, and people were like, oh, you're from St. Louis. And so now I carry around a St. Louis Tervis mug so people know there's another topic of conversation you can bring up. The funny thing is that they all want to talk more about the City Museum than the Arch or sports. So yeah, anyone who'd been there like, oh man, that place is awesome. This is also from Windy City Rails. This is Aaron Kalin. He gave a talk dressed in this costume, Windy City Rails 2015. I think that was the second year he had done that. I don't think he had the head. I think he had a stormtrooper head the first time. So wear something outrageous so people will come talk to you. In some ways, this might be a way to hide behind the outrageousness, though, actually. So I think he's actually probably introverted, and it's sort of this, literally a mask, right? If that's a little much, maybe just dye your hair a wild color. This is why I tried to find the picture of Deech and see what he would look like with wild-colored hair, but I didn't think it was going to work anyway. This is Jamie Hampton and John Sawers. I know John works for Test Double. I think Jamie might too, and I believe they both do the podcast Greater Than Code. Greater Than Code. So it's sort of the things beyond just the coding. It's like, okay, work together, things like that. This is Aaron Patterson's cat, a sticker of his cat. He likes to hand out stickers. You can hand out stickers for your company. I forgot to bring any. Or your side project. So this is his cat, Gorbachev Puff Puff Thunderhorse III, also known as Gorby Puff. He has a second cat, SeaTac Airport, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, also known as Choo Choo. So he has stickers of his cats that you can come up and ask him for. He's actually very shy. He has keynoted probably the closing keynote, probably the last 10 years at RailsConf, but he's actually really shy. So he tells a lot of puns, and I think that's a lot of it's to get over his nervousness, actually. I thought this one was really cute. So Sean Griffin, another person in the Rails community, actually he's left the Rails community to, I believe he wrote Ecto maybe? I don't know, I think he's in the Elixir Phoenix community now. Him and his wife had a baby a few years ago named Ruby, and he passed out these stickers with Ruby and a little diaper. I thought that was so cool. This is Heidi Waterhouse. She carries around a big bag of stickers, and then she puts them on a table, and she sits down, and people just kind of come and I don't even really collect stickers, but I was just enthralled and sat with her at RubyConf in 2017 in New Orleans. There was a party going on at.
Just gotta find a place to put them.
Yeah.
I love their laptop. I put them on my tool shelf.
Well, I don't even. Some ways I just collect them to bring to people here and down. Like here, take what you want. Yeah. So she actually has a big collection. She trades them, or you can just take what you want. And then you have a conversation with her. You're like, it's a conversation starter. And I sat there for probably half an hour, and it was, it's a party, so I'm kind of in this big aquarium, and I kind of walked around and kind of had talked, and then I kind of just wanted to sit down and kind of relax and little kind of de-stress, and it was really casual. We just kind of had a simple, easy conversation, and just someone was talking about the stickers. I'm like, well, first of all, like, what are you doing? Second of all, like, what is this sticker? It doesn't have a name or anything. You know what this one is? This one's awesome. So yeah, that's her little trick. And this is not the conference I sat down with her at, so she does it all the time. Does anyone else have trouble hearing people in noisy places?
What'd you say?
Yes, it's awful. I don't have a lot of good advice on this one. I'm still really bad at it. The one thing I do is I try to sit in the middle of a table when I'm in a group, so I can kind of hear more people, instead of like the person on the end I'm never going to hear anyway. But if I'm in the middle, maybe I have a chance of hearing the people on the end. Yeah, sometimes you end up in the middle of the two conversations at the end of the table, so maybe try to gear how many conversations there'll be and like put yourself in the middle of one. I don't know. I tell people that they need to speak up because I'm a bit hard of hearing. I don't know. It's not untrue. It's not diagnosed, but like, I don't know. Give a talk. That's me just a month ago. Start with a smaller group like this one. This one's pretty small. This one's not too bad as far as being a lot of people looking at me, which doesn't bother me, a few people looking at me. So people will come up to you and want to talk more about your topic. It's a nice hack. Strange Loop 2015 again, which is when I wrote most of this talk, actually. Camille Fournier talked about distributed systems design, and she talked a lot about trade-offs. Engineering is sort of this, by definition, is measuring these trade-offs, deciding which is better for the situation. So choosing to be more outgoing is a trade-off, actually. The cons are you're going to feel awkward, it's hard, it takes time, it's stressful sometimes. But the pros are that you meet new people, you learn new things, you connect to your community and the world. And for me, connecting with the world and my community is important. I actually gave a talk about that earlier this year. And it's important to most people, right? So I hope that you'll find your own ways to get better at doing that. And I am more than happy to take feedback. So thank you to Deej for inspiring the talk. Thanks to my wife for prompting me to give the talk. Thanks for all of you coming and watching on video, and everyone who provided feedback. You can hear more of me on This Agile Life. My RailsConf 2019 talk was actually mentioned on Ruby on Rails podcast this last week. Thanks to Chris Oliver, who gave a talk here last month. It's about 3/4 of the way in if you want to see that, listen to that. The video of that talk, the RailsConf 2019 talk, has been posted. It's about active record and repository pattern. The Ruby Rogues have asked me to do a podcast with them, so that's really exciting. So, the source of this presentation and most of my presentations is on GitHub. I am Booch on GitHub. You can go to my presentations repo. You can even look at my proposals if you want me to give a talk to your group. Feel free to send me an email or a tweet, or just talk to me. That is it. Thanks.